First and foremost, I just want to thank everyone for being here tonight. Water is a very important issue, especially to the North State, but to the entire state of California. And so it's very important that you're all here. There's a lot of people out there who are talking about water, but your willingness to be here tonight and to help take action is admirable, and that's what we need to do here in the North State. We have to be active. For those of you who don't know me, my name is James Gallagher. I'm the Assemblyman for this area, and I will be your moderator this evening. I'd also like to introduce Congressman Doug LaMalfa, and Senator Jim Nielsen, who have graciously agreed to help host this forum with me tonight. Both Doug and Jim have been leaders on the water issue in Washington, D.C. and Sacramento for many years. I'm kind of newer to this. This is my first term in the Assembly, but I'm certainly not new to water, having served as a South Sutter County Supervisor, dealing in flood control and water issues there. I also want to recognize our panel of water experts that we've asked to have us be with us here tonight. David Guy from the Northern California Water Association. Thad Bettner from the Glen Close Irrigation District. And Jim Watson, the new manager of the Sites Joint Powers Authority. So before I turn the mic over here, I did want to talk a little bit about the purpose and the goal of this forum tonight. It kind of started that both Senator Nielsen and I and Congressman LaMalfa really wanted to provide an opportunity to, first of all, educate people about what's going on with Proposition 1 water bond. I've gotten a lot of questions about that. Hey, why aren't we seeing projects moving? I voted for this, proposition in November, and we want to see what's going on there. So a big part of it was just to educate. We want to make sure that we give people a status update on what's going on with sites. And so we brought, the manager here tonight who can give us an update on what's going on with that project, how it's working its way through the process. But we also know that this drought has caused some very devastating impacts throughout the North State and throughout California. Tens of thousands of jobs have been lost. Hundreds of thousands of acres of fertile farmland fallowed in the last 2 years. People in communities without drinking water having to be trucked in, literally trucked in, to help serve drinking water to certain communities in California. And to add to that, billions of dollars in economic loss in this state because of this drought, because we weren't prepared. The good news is that last year California voters approved Proposition 1, and in that bond it dedicates $2.7 billion to water storage projects. Now, I want to point out this was due in a large part to the work of Senator Jim Nielsen, who stood very hard in those negotiations, both in 2009 and here in last year, to make sure that that money was there and it was earmarked for water storage projects. So I did want to give a little kudos to Senator Nielsen. The even better news is that Sites Reservoir is well positioned to be funded under Proposition 1, that $2.7 billion, and we're going to find out a little bit more about that here in a bit. Without getting into too many particulars of the water bond right now, I do want to say that it was a negotiation, and we didn't get everything that we wanted out of that. If it was up to Jim and Doug and myself, we certainly would have saw a much bigger investment in water storage instead of $2.7 billion. We would like to see a guarantee that projects like Sites get funded, and a much quicker timeline for construction. And like many of you, I too am frustrated by the decades of studies and bureaucratic red tape that has stood in the way. Sites has been studied since Dwight D. Eisenhower was president. But with that all being said and being frustrated, this is a historic opportunity, one that otherwise would be unlikely without Proposition 1. And our goal of this forum is also to make sure that we take input from you about your concerns on the water bond and how that money is being spent, and also to provide an avenue for you to take action. We don't want to just talk, we want to act, because we know that action is what gets things done. We've seen government not keep its promises in the past, and we simply cannot allow that to happen with this bond. Now, I know that not everybody may be on board with sites, or there may be other concerns about other water-related issues in this region, and we want to do our best to address all the water concerns here tonight, and we'll do our best to answer those questions. But I want to keep in mind that we are very focused on Proposition 1 and making sure that water storage projects are built with that money. Now, just for a quick rundown of our agenda, the first half of this forum, I'm going to hand it over to Congressman LaMalfa and Senator Nielsen to talk about some of the things going on at the federal and state level with these projects, and then also have some input from our water experts board. And the second half, we'll then move to a Q&A session where we're going to be taking your questions and trying to answer those questions about this process and how we can act to make our water security and reliability strong for the future. We are going to have a couple staff members out here, and maybe they can wave their hands. I think Salo, where are you? He's waving his hand in the back, and Zach Brown, who are going to be running around with the microphone. If you have a question, raise your hand. They will come to you, and then have the mic for you so you can ask your question. So look out for those young men there. And I'd also like to note that our tech-savvy staff here have set up a live stream of this meeting using Periscope, which is a new app out there that helps live stream video of what is a very important issue, and using new technology to get that information out to the people. So thank you for all those who are watching over Periscope and online. So without further delay, I do want to hand this mic over to my friend and our Congressman, Doug LaMalfa, to kind of start us off. Congressman?
Well, thank you, James. I appreciate your leadership on this meeting here tonight, as well as you didn't give yourself a lot of credit for being kind of new on the block, because his effort, his work in Sutter County and the Sutter Butte project with levees has been very, very good, very effective. And so he's hit the ground running very fast as our state assemblyman here, and getting up on this issue and being a big driving force on that. So I look for a lot more great things from him. And my colleague, Senator Nielsen, James mentioned in 2009, I was between jobs then. I was out of the Assembly, not in the state Senate yet. He was a very saving force on the negotiations on the water bond at that time, and some of the other legislation that could have happened that would have negatively affected us up here. And then the final version of the bond, as it was placed on the November 2014 ballot, the voters approved, which he fought hard to keep the amount of money in there that was in there, since the governor and others didn't want that much in there. So I've been frustrated over the years that we see a lot of things called water bonds in California that go by without any actually new water storage for Northern California. My father served many years on the board that David Guy is heading up, Northern California Water Association. I talked with him as a younger person at the time, and feel his frustration that we couldn't get some things done. But you know what? This is an exciting time right now, because the window is open for us. The voters have approved actual water storage money for Prop 1. That money is there. We have a project that's ready to go. I think it's acclaimed all up and down the state as being one is very viable, very doable, and has really broad support amongst all types of water users, whether they're ag, urban, industrial, or environmental. So it's a balanced approach, kind of a unique thing that's happened in water storage in California. So at the federal level, the angle we're working on is making sure that we have legislation that helps to get sites authorized under the federal guidelines that would be in place. So we have two bills. One's a broader bill that's called H.R. 2898 by David Valadao. It's already passed the House, waiting over in the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee. Will be heard sometime in October. I don't think the date is quite certain yet. We're talking maybe October 8th, sometime mid of the month. And again, it will finally finish the draft feasibility study on sites. And what is important about this is timing. So your help here tonight and ongoing, we'll talk about that a little bit later, but the timing is going to be critical, because the end of 2016 is an important time to have a project ready and be able to pull down that money. And I'll leave it to some of the other folks to talk about that. It's not steal all the thunder here, but the legislation will also help because of early prepayments of CVP water contracts, put up to $300 million available towards the project because of those prepayments. And a very important component is that what we fought for to make sure was in this bill is the protection of North State water rights, which is paramount in anything we do. And that's part of what's the beauty about sites. If we're adding almost 2 million new acre feet, just its existence alone will take pressure off the rest of the system. Whether they're going to come to us, come to our water districts and try and negotiate or just flat take away our water rights, or the groundwater recharge that will help with too. Keeping more of the water in Northern California. If we're creating it here, we're taking pressure off the rest of the system. They won't be looking at us with a laser pointed on us to come try to take our water, whether by muscle or by other means. And so that's one of the important components, groundwater recharge and the availability of 2 million acre feet for one thing or another. So the importance of that is also in the legislation is that more of our water rights will stay here. There'll be stronger allocation for our Northern California districts because area of origin is important. Where the water lands, people in that area ought to have a little more first call on that water, wouldn't you think? We're the ones who have to put up with the flooding and the other things that happen with that, so we should probably have a little stronger first call on that. Now, if this bill isn't able to be successful in the Senate, if it's seen as too broad or there's other things that are added to it, we do have a measure that's specific to sites. Representative John Garamendi and myself are both advancing this bill. It's called H.R. 1060. We're holding on to that for a little while the other legislation moves along, but we'll have that in the wings too because again, and this is one I want you to take away tonight, timing is very important. We have to have a strong charge ready for the end of next year, end of 2016, so that we're being a strong voice. So those two pieces of legislation are going to help at the federal level to make sure that we're advancing the Sites project, which is, again, the best project we can be doing in California in viability of anything we could be doing. So I'm looking at the overall picture of the benefits of sites. You know, some might say, well, here you are, a farmer, you just want more farm water. Well, of course. But as I mentioned, groundwater recharge, it'll have more water available for refuges, which is a very important part of the ecology of the area, the tourism of the area, whether you're hunting on it or you're bird watching on it. The refuges is something I support as well. And so there's just a lot of win-wins on this. And I can't really see what the arguments are against this other than perhaps it costs money. But what's exciting about that is we're getting a lot of private support coming into it as well. And I'll let the others talk about that too. But it's really the kind of project that is the win-win. It's kind of equal multifaceted benefits. And so this is kind of the spirit of the way things work in 2015. Let's get it done. So with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Senator Nielsen here, and he'll tell us about a little more at the state level. But I thank you all again for being here tonight, your interest in this, and hopefully help be a driving force on doing this. So thank you so much.
Way to go, Doug, and it's great to be a part of this team of three. And Assemblyman Gallagher, though he's new to the legislature and dealing at the legislative level here, he has long been involved in water issues. He's very knowledgeable, and he hit the ground more than running and is indeed your ally and leader in this area. You know, at 2 o'clock in the morning, one winter day and night, rather, in Arnold Schwarzenegger's office, I was frustrated. We were negotiating the water plan and a bond for that year. It was a significant water plan and then a bond also that was going to go on the ballot 2014. It did not go on in 2014. It became, though, Prop 1 later. But I looked around that table, and everybody had been talking about the next election and the politics of this bond. And in frustration, I said, don't you understand this is not about now, the next election, or the politics? It's about our grandchildren. You, ladies and gentlemen, are here because you care about your grandchildren. You want them to have a future. And in California, we cannot, in either energy or water, conserve our way into the future for our grandchildren. Conservation absolutely has its place, and no other industry has done more for conservation than our industry. agriculture. But that alone cannot be the answer. Not since Lake Oroville and the Oroville Dam has there been a major storage project in the state of California. The time was nigh. And in 2009, some things very significant happened that changed the whole picture in water in this state. One, as I said, there was a decision made that we cannot conserve our way into the future. Storage has got to be a part of that future. Further, that humans had a water right. It had evolved where humans were the lesser water right. And humans don't just include drinking, bathing. Human consumption of water includes the water needed to produce the food and fiber for us to live our lives. So something came out of that which was called co-equal goals. Co-equal, which meant humans had an equal water right. And in addition, for decades, everything about water, the water debate, had been delta-centric, about fixing the delta. Everything was focused on fixing the delta. Cal-Fed spent billions of dollars, did not fix the delta. Well, this policy change in the legislation of '09 changed that dynamic, where water policy now is no longer delta-centric. Everybody's included. And we were successful in that bond, which again did not go to the ballot, and Prop 1, which did. And in '09 in the statute to get the strongest area of origin protection language in the history of California. And I want to thank NACWA, the Northern California Water Agency, and the Regional Council of Rural Counties, who worked very, very closely with me drafting that legislation. And it's not insignificant or inconsequent that we were successful in getting that anchoring area of origin language in statute. And again, that's also in Prop 1. Now a lot of you are here back in the late 70s and through the 80s, fighting with many of us against the peripheral canal. Because that was not the answer, nor are the peripheral tunnels the answer now either. And I kind of don't like the administration and high-level officials that said, we'll build it no matter what, and we don't need any legislation. I don't agree with that, and I think that the fatal ending of the triple tunnels and the speed train are both going to be the fact that they can't be paid for. The users can't pay for the water, and the riders will not pay for the train. So I think after Governor Brown leaves, both of those are going to founder. But we are not focused on that tonight. We're focused on what I call our Sites Reservoir and the best opportunity for storage in California. There's another project that could be considered called Temperance Flat, and maybe some other ones, but really it's the big two, Sites and Temperance. And to the credit of the folks up here, and I mean the Sites Reservoir Joint Powers Authority, comprised of people who represent all of you and all of us, they've got their act together. Down in the San Joaquin Valley, where Temperance Flat will be, they don't. They don't even have a JPA formed yet. Now, that message has not been lost on the Water Commission. And you're showing here tonight, and if you will please come in similar numbers down to Yuba City on the 21st of October, you're going to get their attention, because you did when you came here several months ago. If you remember, we had 2 of the members of the Water Commission here with you. And about around 320 of you showed up that night, and they were stunned at the turnout. About a month later in Fresno, they only got a turnout of 100. So the point is, your attendance here, your continued participation is going to be significant if we are going to be able to plead our case. I don't think we're going to have any problems. We also had a victory late last year. Just about this time, I was finally getting some sleep from all the battles. Governor Brown came up with a new bond, which became Prop 1, and he only wanted $2 billion for storage. That was not okay. That wouldn't have even given us 1. Then he upped the ante and he came up to 2.5. They called an ASPE and I said, no. No. We've already got $3 billion that's passed to be on the ballot. Why would we bargain down? Well, there was some hard bargaining and we did get down to 2.7. But that is sufficient for our purposes, particularly knowing the good work that the Sites JPA has been able to do to identify potential purchasers for water. And as Doug so forcefully said, and James acknowledged as well, this project helps us in all respects take pressure off the North State, not just because we have the area of origin language, not just because it's not Delta-centric anymore, but because now we have the opportunity to take excess flows and store them and use it for multiple beneficial uses and not have to get in the crises that we have had in water. Now, I've been asked, why do we need surface storage? If we just have a rainy winter, all the reservoirs will fill up. Yeah, I guess they will. But have we not had past droughts? I've farmed through 3 of them, at least that I remember. This is the hardest, but 3 of them in my lifetime. There will be more. And our job is to prepare. Your job is here to be informed, to ask questions, to become more informed. But then leave here tonight with a resolve to communicate wherever you can, in what organization, whatever circle of friends that you have, the importance of this. And you'll have an opportunity to communicate with the water commissioners, and you'll have an opportunity, as you did up here a few months ago, to see them again and show them the outpouring of support in Northern California for surface storage. There are many issues, ladies and gentlemen, but this certainly ought to be one of the most important, and your presence here acknowledges that. I thank you for being here. We look forward to a good evening.
Well, thank you, Senator and Congressman. I don't have a whole lot more to add to what they've said, but I did want to highlight a couple of things before we get to our water experts here. First of all, I've seen my role as your new assemblyman. With this bond passed and this historic opportunity, I've seen my role as really threefold. One is to build relationships in the legislature to make sure that this bond money gets spent on new water storage. And so right off the bat, I wasn't on water committee, but they had a vacancy on the first meeting, and I said, I'm in. And I went to the water committee meeting, and I got ready. We had all the agencies there, the Water Commission, Department of Water Resources, and I was ready to weigh in on water storage. And guess what? Before I could do that, a Democrat from that represents Napa County spoke up and said, we need to make sure that these projects get funded right away. Right after this 2016 deadline that's in the bond, we need to make sure they're right away. And I said, wow, okay, great. And then I got ready to go and pipe in again, and I got interrupted. Democrat from Merced County said, hey, why are we waiting until 2016? We need to get on these projects now. And people expected that they would be water storage projects, not watershed restoration, not ecological restoration, but real water storage that brings new additional water to the system. And, you know, I said, man, I've already got some allies here. Of course, I still weighed in myself because you might as well pile in while you got the chance. So building those relationships across the aisle has been key, and we have bipartisan support for water storage. The other thing I try to do is build public support for these projects. And so we've done a few things. One, we helped bring the Water Commission up here to Chico, and so many of you showed up. Over 300 people showed up in this very room to talk to 2 water commissioners and talk about the importance of new water storage in this state. It was unbelievable. You know how many people they had show up at their public meeting in Davis? 12. But right here in Chico, 300 people showed up and they talked about why water is so important to us, all the different aspects of why water is important to us in this region. And I'll tell you, after talking to those commissioners afterwards, they were very impressed by this group. So right off the bat, we did that. We held a rally on the Capitol steps. And some of the people in this room and some people down from the Central Valley came up to talk about the need of new water storage projects and to get them off the ground quickly. I had a bill up in committee that day, AB 311, that would streamline the CEQA process the California Environmental Quality Act, for water storage projects. And we turned out a ton of people who showed up, rallied on the Capitol steps, and went to the committee meeting that day to talk about, we need to get these projects done now. We weren't ultimately successful, but we started the conversation. And there's already people on the other side who are talking about that very same issue next year. So we're going to have another opportunity, and that's also good news for us. But I think the other thing that we've really done well is continuing to build that public support, to continue to have all of you acting and weighing in on this issue. The Water Commission is going to make those decisions about how this $2.7 billion is spent. And that's why it's important for us to show up and to show up in numbers and to continue to communicate to the Water Commission. And that's why we're here tonight, to talk about how we can do that and to talk about maybe how we do that. And, you know, that's going to be important as we move forward. The other thing I want to point out that is, I think, very important for us up here, our biggest competitor for this money is those who think we should have groundwater storage. And that should be very scary to people in this room for a couple of reasons. Number one, groundwater storage, most of the projects they talk about for groundwater storage are down in the South Central Valley or in the LA Basin. They're not up here. The water does not fall down there. So where are they going to get the water to fill up these groundwater basins that they're talking about filling up for groundwater storage? They're going to take it from the existing pie. And this is what I think people need to know. Groundwater storage does not increase that existing pie that we have. We only have this right now. We need to increase that pie. Groundwater storage doesn't do that. It's going to ultimately have to take from somewhere in the system. So that's a problem. The second thing is I'm really concerned about the state getting into our groundwater basins and talking about groundwater storage and maybe even talking about utilizing our basins up here for groundwater storage. That's a non-starter. Groundwater is a local resource. It's not part of the state's resource. It's a local resource that's dedicated to our basins and our local needs and concerns. And so we need to be very adamant about fighting against our competitors. There's a lot of powerful environmental groups out there who are advocating for groundwater storage and that money gets spent on groundwater storage. Sierra Club, we actually have back there in the back, we have a blown up flyer of one of their emails telling everybody, advocate for groundwater storage. People didn't vote for Proposition 1 for new reservoirs. That's what it says. That's what these people are telling them to do. But we're more active right now, and we need to stay more active. So I just encourage you to continue to do that. Like I said, 300 here, 12 in Davis. We need to keep that up. And you all can be an important part of talking about all of these issues that we brought up tonight. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our panel of water experts. And I can just bring the microphone over to you if you prefer that, David. Or
whatever works best.
Okay. Yeah, and I know you guys have a presentation as well, so.
Thank you. Good evening. Thanks, everyone, for taking the time to engage in this obviously very important issue. I'm going to set the stage a little bit tonight for the discussion around infrastructure and the importance of Sites Reservoir. I first just want to acknowledge the efforts of the three folks sitting here to my right. Congressman LaMalfa, the water rights language and the sites language in the federal legislation is there because of him. I want to acknowledge Senator Nielsen. The area of origin, water rights language, and sites in the water bond is there because of Senator Nielsen. And Assemblyman Gallagher has just hit the ground running and is carrying on what he did, the great work he did in Sutter County. So we're real blessed here as a region, and what they say is absolutely right. I'm going to start by just kind of setting the stage. Then Thad's going to kind of drill down a little bit and talk about kind of some of the challenges that are facing the water suppliers here in Northern California, and then Jim will talk specifically about Sites Reservoir. So obviously we live in just a great region. I think we're all love living here, we love working here, we love playing here, and I think that we all recognize that this region is special because of one particular thing: water. And that, let's think about that a little bit further. We have 2 million acres of farmland in this region. That's the backbone of this region. We have 6 national wildlife refuges, 50 state wildlife areas. The Pacific Flyway is a resource of international significance. People come from all over the world, as Congressman LaMalfa mentioned, to enjoy the Flyway. We have 4 runs of salmon, the only place in the world that you have that. Several of the runs are endangered. We spent a lot of time. We have a salmon recovery program that we are working on to try to help recover the salmon in this region, because we know that we can't manage water in this region without taking care of the salmon. And obviously, we have the cities and the rural communities, much like you all are here tonight, that really are the centerpiece of the region. And then, of course, the mountains and the watersheds that feed this great valley. And John Kingsbury is here, I know, from the Mountain County Water Association. Obviously, these are important parts of our region as well. When you look at the water use across the region, this is the breakdown during a wet year. We have 2 years that I'm going to illustrate here just to kind of paint that picture. As you can see, agriculture uses, probably about 1/3 of that water, and then there's environmental water is a little bit above 50% during the wet years. That number shifts a little bit during the dry years. We use 2007 as illustrative for the dry year. That shifts, so there's obviously the higher percentage for agriculture and less for environmental, but the environmental water is still about 50% of the water use in this region. That shift obviously is happening because, in part, agriculture pumps more groundwater during dry years, and there's less water in stream. So I think you would expect those numbers to be about that. This is the hydrograph of the Sacramento Valley over the last essentially 100 years. The blue are the wet years, the yellow are the dry years. And you can see, we all know that everybody in this room, I suspect, has lived through the floods and now lived through a 4-year drought and some of the droughts that we had in 76, 77, 88 through 94. We know that we have extremes, and I think that really highlights the importance of water infrastructure to be able to manage those water supplies, both during the wet periods, during the flood events, as well as during the dry periods. This here paints a picture, and this infographic was available in the back of the room for folks who are interested in the details of it. This shows the water supplies in the Sacramento Valley this year. Let me just take a moment to emphasize, in my view, how important water rights and contracts are. I think folks generally know, but the Sacramento Valley is essentially a funnel, and all the water in the Sacramento Valley flows south and out through the Delta and out through the Bay. Without water rights and without contracts, all that water goes south. The water rights and the contracts are what allow us to utilize that water within the Sacramento Valley. And that's why I think we are all so passionate and so dedicated to protecting those water rights and those contracts as we go into the future. That surface water supply is obviously not only important for the immediate use that it's provided for, whether it's farms, refuges, cities, salmon, but it also obviously is important for the groundwater resource as well. If we don't have that surface water resource, the groundwater will be pumped in a much more significant way. And in fact, that surface water is what in fact recharges the groundwater as well. So I think when we talk about the importance of surface water, the groundwater is ultimately the beneficiary of that surface water. And I think that's very important to consider. So where does that lead us? It's one thing to invest in the water rights. We had people in this valley that were very forward-looking back in the 1800s who we're able to secure water rights. We're able to ultimately secure contracts for all the way through the present for this great region. But it's not enough just to say that you have a water right. We have to invest as we go into the future in the infrastructure that will be necessary to protect those water rights and to be able to utilize those water rights into the future. And that infrastructure, of course, includes our existing reservoirs, Oroville, Shasta, Bullard's Bar. Those are all just critical, particularly in years like this. We saw the value of surface storage. Remember, this year there was no snowpack, essentially. Those surface water reservoirs were the only water that we had this year. And again, if we didn't have that, the groundwater would have been pumped a lot more than it was. And then also we have habitat that we need to gravel, that kind of thing that we want to build infrastructure for the benefit of salmon. We want to build conveyance for the refuges. There's a lot of infrastructure that we need to build in the Sacramento Valley, and I think now is the time. Proposition 1, the work that Doug is doing in the federal level are all really important tools to help us build some of this infrastructure that we all need in this region. And of course, Sites Reservoir is the most prominent of the infrastructure that we need in this great region, as you're going to be hearing from both Thad and Jim. So I'm going to pass the mic over to Thad and look forward to the rest of the discussion.
Good evening. Thank you for giving me the opportunity just to share a few things with you as we kind of walk through, at least from our perspective, the importance of sites. And just a little bit about our district, Glenn-Cluse Irrigation District. Just so you know, we're about 175,000 acres here in Northern California. We're the largest district. We represent about 2,000 landowners. So we have both folks that use groundwater and surface water, a variety of different crops. We have 3 federal refuges that we deliver water to and have a great partnership with the refuge complex. And then we also service a lot of private habitat lands that provide many environmental benefits to the region. And really what I want to talk about is really talk about some of the concerns that we see, and then kind of put that in a context, or what are some of the solutions that we need to be looking forward as a community as we move forward. And first, I really want to talk about and really focus on some of the things that are easy to see. For example, this year, as you know, we've had extreme low levels in storage in our surface reservoirs, looking at Shasta, Trinity, and Oroville in the Sacramento Valley. And just to put that in context, currently we have in Shasta about 1.4 million acre feet of storage. If you compare that to the 1977 drought, there was only 700,000 acre feet in Lake Shasta. So you can see just the, even in the future or last droughts, we were able to draw down surface storage even more than we did this year because we didn't have some of the environmental requirements in place. Another big issue was winter run survival. As David Guy mentioned, those are protected species. And if you look at this year's operations and how the entire California water system was operated, it was all to protect winter run salmon. And those primarily reside on the section of the Sacramento River up in the city of Redding. And what happened was Shasta had to protect the winter run. And then Oroville had to take and backstop the work that Shasta would have done to help meet some of the other requirements. Folsom had to release additional water. So essentially you had one species driving the entire operation of the project. Not to use acronyms, but I put the SWRCB, that's the State Water Resources Control Board. They're in Sacramento, and they were concerned about operations. So they went and operated and controlled all the diversions this year. David mentioned water rights and contracts. The state board basically said, nope, we're trumping those this year. We're taking control of the system. We had critical year allocations, and then, as I mentioned, we had Shasta and Oroville, our 2 North State big reservoirs, were used to drive the entire rest of the state's operations. That included water allocations, in-stream flow requirements for fish, water flowing out the Golden Gate to protect delta water quality. Our reservoirs up here were doing all the rest of the state's work, and it still was not enough. Future concerns. As David mentioned, I think there's a concern that we will continue to have erosion of our surface water rights through efforts by the State Water Resources Control Board and certain portions of the environmental community who are currently actively suing to take away part of our surface water. State Water Resources Control Board intervention in the SGMA process, the State Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. We all need to be developing sustainable regions, water basins. And if we don't do that as a community, the state board will come in and take over. We're going to see the need for increased in-stream flow requirements in order to protect salmon. We saw a little bit of this year, as I mentioned, when the state board went in and changed the flow regime on rivers. We're going to see increased delta flow requirements. There's already activity by the state board, for example, on the San Joaquin River to take about 40% of the water that's currently used in the San Joaquin River Basin and send it out to the ocean. They're looking at doing the same thing in Sacramento. So again, another reason that we need to be concerned about where's that water going to come from. And again, there's other delta solutions being promoted that we need to be concerned about that could affect our region. And I like to use this picture because I think it's really indicative of the Sacramento Valley and the different uses that we have. You know, we have rice is a significant crop in this region. We have permanent crops that are starting to populate more and more areas of our region. We have endangered species like the giant garter snake. We have the Pacific flyway we need to protect. We have endangered species, as David mentioned, for winter run, spring run. We have restoration projects we need to do. And then we just have the part of the valley that we all love living in. And we need to balance all those. We can't pick one priority of use and say the rest of them don't matter, and all of a sudden we upset the apple cart. We have a careful balance that we need to manage, and that's what we try and do on a daily basis. So in terms of near-term solutions, I really want to promote that we need to continue to press the State Water Resources Control Board to honor water rights and the contracts and the priority system we have. And I think that's one of the primary roles that we have, the Northern California Water Association, and the work that David does. We need to develop sustainability plans that are required by SGMA and avoid State Water Resources Control Board intervention. That's going to be required by the water agencies and the counties all in this region. We need to be working together to make sure we're implementing groundwater that's long-term, that's sustainable. We need restoration projects, which I want to talk in a little bit. And I think another key function is you look at all these different needs that are being put on Northern California, there is a place for Sites Reservoir and the Joint Powers Authority. Quickly just talking about a couple restoration projects. I want to talk about Knights Landing Outfall Gate. This is a project to protect salmon, winter run salmon from stranding. At the bottom right of the slide there, that's a structure, a flood control structure where fish actually swim through those gates and get upstream into a flood control channel that they can't get out of, and they end up perishing. So we're in the process right now. The local district, RD-108, is taking that and putting a floating weir structure in front of it to protect salmon from straying up that structure, which would save vital winter run salmon. And they're not just saying it, they want to do it, they're actually doing it. This is actually a construction photo from today. They're actually doing the work. They've owned that project, they're spending their own money, and other settlement contractors spending our own money to get this work done in order to protect salmon. It's not just about flow, it's also about restoration projects. And then I just wanted to finish up about, and this is a video, and hopefully it plays, but this is a project we actually did up in the city of Redding. It's called the Painter's Riffle Project. And it's really about a project where we had a section of the side channel of the river, as you can see, where gravel filled in part of this channel. It used to be a section of the river that the four runs of fish would use. And what happened was the city of Redding constructed a bridge. There was gravel out in the river. The fishery agency said, leave the gravel in the river, it's good for it. And what happened is all that gravel, as you can see right there, washed into the channel and basically blocked it to where that channel was not available for fish to spawn anymore. Our district, our board decided to take that project on and said, we need to do this locally. We can't rely upon the agencies to get this done. The fish are too vital. Their survival is too important to allow the fish agencies to continue to kick the bucket. So we decided to take the project on. We acquired all the permits for the project. We did all the CEQA work, the NEPA work. We funded it. We spent our own money. And then we got our own people to actually get out there in the river and start doing the work. And what we saw was as we started to work on it more people started to say, this is a successful type project that we want to do. And so through this effort, now you can see some of our guys actually out there starting to reconstruct the channel, where we opened up nearly a mile of new habitat for salmon that weren't able to use it. And for winter run, this is the area that's their critical habitat. They need this specific part of the river in order to spawn in. They can't spawn any further south than this location. So we did this work. We partnered with some of the agencies, including the city of Redding, and have continued to take that effort and move forward. We've already got 2 more projects scoped out for this year that we want to work on. We're working with other partners to do other restoration projects on different parts of the river, all to benefit these runs of salmon. It's all about taking the pressure off the system so we have a functioning environment that we live in, because currently we don't necessarily have a functioning environment. We need to make sure we can put that back in place. So that's really our goal going forward. That's part of our plan. And as we talk about sites, there's also an integrated part where Sites Reservoir helps to support some of these types of fishery restoration projects. And there's a finished project. And one of the nice things that we saw this was done about spring of this year, we've actually seen salmon spawn in that part of the river. So it was actually a successful project. Thank you.
Well, good evening. And obviously, what David and Thad set the stage for how critical water is to this economy and the need to reinvest. And obviously, the turnout here was standing room only. I do appreciate you making the time to come out and hear us talk about the projects and the issues here in the Valley. I'd like to give you a brief overview of the Sites project and where we are with implement the project. I think most of you, if you're not familiar with it, it's just west of the town of Maxwell. The general plan is to use the Tehama-Colusa Canal and the Glen-Colusa Canals, which have existing diversions on the Sacramento River, to use storm runoff flows to deliver down and pump into the reservoir, which would then be released at a later time for water supply and environmental benefits. A little bit of more detail of the actual location is the large reservoir. We're looking at a couple of sizes of between 1.3 and 1.8 million acre feet, which makes it about the 7th largest dam in the state. So it is going to be large. But the facilities have the capacity to put the water back into the Sacramento River so that it can help with water supply and, again, help with the ecological benefits that Prop 1 is looking to achieve. What is Sites? Well, first off, it's not really your traditional reservoir that has been built. It's off-stream, which means we found a location where there was not an existing river channel, so we were not blocking the migration of existing species. So it has also been specifically configured to achieve the co-equal goals of water supply and environmental benefits. Some of the environmental benefits are the cold water pool at Shasta, which also affects, as well as Oroville and Folsom, which takes pressure off those reservoirs in terms of meeting the water requirements for the winter run salmon that Thad mentioned. Sites is also really being operated to minimize impacts to juvenile salmonids. We're using the existing screened intakes, which do meet the current criteria for being protective of the juvenile fish. And they are separated far enough apart that we have the ability to adjust operations with as the salmon migrate downstream from one intake. We can cut off, let the salmon pass, and then restart the diversions again. Thanks, Thad. The reservoir has probably one of the biggest strengths is the operational flexibility, which we can move water to help with cold water pool. We can help with salinity in the delta. We can help with water supply throughout the Sac Valley as well as the rest of the state. So what Sites isn't is it does not require Shasta releases in order to refill. It takes advantage of the unregulated flows downstream of Keswick. It does not require any expansion of the existing canals, so we can utilize the capacity of those existing canals to fill. And again, we do not need to maintain a large flood reservation. Being off-stream, we do not get large storm events that would require or to hold water down, risking spill. So we can more reliably store that water and carry it over if that's the best use for looking at a future year. So the general location is, this is Sites Dam in the valley just west of Maxwell, the location. We also have Golden Gate Dam, which these dams are about 300 feet tall, so they're not small, but they're well within the technology of dams that have been built in the state going back to the 40s. Then the river intake, this is the location that's proposed. And again, now some of the ecosystem benefits, kind of the cold water pool and the in-stream flows that contribute down into the delta and addressing the X2, which is the salinity requirement. So getting into some of the benefits, Sites has the ability to produce about 500,000 acre feet of usable water every year. And breaking that down, about half that is configured for public benefits, for the water, for environmental and cold water pool. But the other half is for water supply. And right now, out of that 250 that we're proposing for water supply, 130,000 acre feet has been subscribed for by members, people, agencies here in the Sac Valley. So this project right now has strong local support from the water agencies for that water to be used here in the Sacramento Valley. And just kind of comparison, the 500,000 acre feet a year is about 160 billion gallons. That's a lot of water. It's about, I think, 250 times what you used this year in Chico in terms of consumption. So it really does move the needle in terms of water supply and making a huge benefit for this part of the valley. Now, if Sites was operated today, there would be additional carryover in the reservoirs, and most notably that 660,000 acre feet that would have been produced this year would have been used as new water to help the economy here in Sac Valley and the state of California. So these are pretty big numbers. That's why it is a big project. Last year, this project would have produced over 400,000 acre feet. So those would have made huge differences to the economy here in the Sac Valley. And as I mentioned, it is a big project. The construction costs are about $3 to $4 billion. At this point, we are in the planning phase, getting ready for the put together a proposal for Proposition 1. All of the funding is paid for by these water agencies that are subscribing for the 130,000 acre feet. So this is locally supported for this project. So what I would like to say before closing is if you are interested in supporting the Sites project, that there is a sign-up sheet with the Family Water Alliance. Please take an opportunity to stop by and sign up and show your support for this project. And thank you for your time.
Hold on to that. All right, well, I want to thank all of you guys for outlining, the status of the project and the challenges that we face. I think Thad really laid it out really well, what we're looking at here and some of the challenges that we have. First of all, we know we need regulatory reform. I mean, the way that the ESA, Endangered Species Act, is being regulated, the way that's being implemented, makes it very difficult for us to use our water rights in the way that we've always used them. And, we know that we need better infrastructure because as was highlighted, even with our existing operation at dams, the way they're operating Oroville and the way they're operating Shasta and the way they're operating Folsom, the existing reservoirs that we have, major reservoirs that we have in the state, means that a lot of that water is going down the system, just being going down into the delta, out into the ocean. That's water we can't utilize. So why Sites, right? I think the summary is really underlined by the challenges that we face. First of all, it takes the target off of our water rights. Because right now our water rights, when that water gets scarce, where are they going to? They're coming to Northern California to try and take our water rights away, which affects us in so many different ways. It affects our farms, it affects our cities, it affects our groundwater. Sites helps take the target off of those water rights back. It also will help us operate these dams a lot better so that we can do those flows for fish, but still have water available for all the things that we need it for here in the North State. It helps make sure that that operation is much better and that we secure and keep our water supply up here and don't send it down south. And finally, it captures water that we haven't previously captured before. We have a ton of water every winter, even in the last 2 winters that we've had and that are drought conditions. When that water falls below the dams, when it falls below Shasta, when it falls below Oroville, right now it just goes right out the system. But with Sites, we can capture that during those winter months and put that water to the side so that we have it available in these tough times. And it will make us much more water resilient in the future. That's what Sites does. And oh, by the way, on the west side, we have problems with groundwater. But having a huge reservoir in Sites Reservoir will help with recharge of the west side, where we're seeing some issues in groundwater, right now. So Sites does so many things to address all those challenges that we talked about here, and that's why it's such a focal point. That's why it's such a cornerstone of what we need to do with this water bond money. Before we get to the Q&A, I did want to point out a couple of things we have in the back, because a big part of this is, like I said, to take action. One thing I want to highlight is we have these cards in the back. They're kind of a, light tan colored cards. And on there, you have information on all these agencies that are involved with this decision, including the Water Commission, how to contact them, their emails, Sites Reservoir Joint Powers Authority, Northern California Water Association, and all that information is on here so you can get involved and contact these people directly. We've also prepared just a draft template letter that you could send to the Water Commission. And, this is just a draft template. It talks about the benefits of sites and why it's a good project, helps build that public support. But if you really want to take something away from here, I'd love for people to take this and make their own personal stories into this letter. Incorporate that in there. Talk about how this drought has affected your farms. Talk about how it's affected your domestic wells. Talk about how the lack of water infrastructure has made it harder for your cities, to operate their water systems. The more we personalize this and talk about why this is important to us, that message is going to, resound more with the Water Commission. So I would encourage you to take this. You could just send it off. That's the easy thing to do. And it has the key, kind of talking points in there. But if you could take it and make it your own, that's even better. The other thing I want to highlight is we advocated for this hard. We wanted the Water Commission to come to Northern California. They are coming on October 21st. They're going to be in Yuba City. They're holding a meeting there all day long at the Yuba City Council chambers. But afterwards, they're having a public comment period at 6 o'clock at the Veterans Memorial Building, which is right across the street from the Yuba City Council chambers. That's another opportunity for us to show up and communicate our concerns to the Water Commission and the need for investing in new water storage in this state. Also on the back here are some talking points that talk about why Sites is a good project, why it meets those public benefits that the bond requires you to meet in order to get funding. And it talks about why Sites is a good project. So again, there's some more resources so that we can act. And so I hope you guys will take those as you go out and use them accordingly. These are resources that we want to help give you so that you can help advocate on behalf of our water reliability and security. So those are just a few things, and now I want to move into the question and answer period. And I think we have our two folks out there with the microphones. Is that right? Salo there in the back and Zach Brown. And questions? We have one right here, Zach. Or
okay. My name's Les Gerton, and I live here in Chico. I've been involved with saving salmon around here for about 35 years. And I like to say that I entirely support this project, and I think it's a great idea. But I also think that there's a tremendous amount of water that can be saved with conservation. For example, with the Glen-Colusa Irrigation District, their canal, according to their own impact report, loses 118,000 acre-feet a year due to infiltration into the ground. So it seems to me that some kind of lining of the canal, whether plastic or cement or rubber or whatever, would be just a tremendous amount of savings on water. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Les, and I appreciate your efforts on, in this region on behalf of salmon. There is one thing I do want to point out is that in the water bond, 2.7 is for storage, but there's also money available for conservation projects. So it's a multifaceted approach. The 2.7 is focused on storage. And I don't know if you want to maybe address some of the issues about
I mean, I think it's a good question, and maybe it just sheds some light on how our system operates up here and the interconnectedness of our surface water and groundwater. And it's interesting. I think you raised a great point. But yeah, I think you have to ask the question of when that water percolates to our main canal, where does it go? and that goes down into the groundwater system and actually recharges the groundwater system. And, you know, just looking at the last 10 years, you know, we have imported or diverted off the Sacramento River into our district alone 7.4 million acre feet into our district. And roughly 20% of that is recharged. So we have recharged the last 10 years about 1.4 million acre feet of groundwater. And that benefits everybody around us. And so I think one of the things going forward is, again, working as a region, it's important that we understand how the system works as a whole. And while conservation, lining a canal may appear as you're saving water, it actually as a system, as a region, as a hydraulic region, actually negatively affects our area. So it's important to have us work through those points, because I think what you're raising is a good question, but I think there is some impacts, if you don't follow it all the way through, could negatively affect our area. But certainly want to follow with you after the meeting and talk more about that or offline, but appreciate your question.
Thanks. My name is Sue Hildebrand. I'm with KZFI Radio, and I'm curious to hear from the three experts. If you could give us just some sort of background on maybe your education or your experience to give us a sense of how or why you're considered experts on water. Thanks very much.
I think that question is for the three of you there.
Okay, I'll start. Can I do it in 2 sentences? Anyway, yeah, David Guy. I've been working in water for 25 years now, representing the North State for probably about 15 of those years exclusively. And I've worked in the environmental community. I've represented farmers for those 25 years, protecting their water rights and doing exactly what we're talking about here this evening.
Let's see, I was born in 1967. No, just kidding. No, interesting. Actually, I grew up on a farm, or my grandparents did, so I spent a lot of time farming growing up. So I think agriculture is huge. I think it's underrated by a lot of people. Food's important, and I don't think we should underestimate the job that those who are in farming do and the importance of it is to our state, our region, and this world. My experience, actually, I've worked all over and have enjoyed every job and have basically respected and understood the areas that I've worked and the importance of how all these systems are different. I started up my career actually as an internship down in Imperial Valley and learned to understand the importance of the Imperial Valley. And actually, when I started working there, one of the big issues was the Salton Sea was getting too big. And I don't know if you know what the big issue now is. It's getting too small. So it's just interesting how things change. And then I went to conjunctive use district, Fresno Irrigation District, where we had surface, groundwater interaction, bunch of different supplies, and understood how the system worked there. It was the same thing, historic water rights, a 100-year-old system that we spent a lot of time improving and upgrading, understanding how efficiency works. Same thing, question down there, why don't we line canals? Because unlined canals recharge the groundwater in that area. Now we're seeing that actually surface irrigation is now back in vogue. You know, it's important to have surface water irrigation because it recharges the groundwater system. So now that's coming back into it. So now let's all be efficient, drip everything, microspray, that's great. Now people have learned that ultra conservation has been detrimental to our groundwater system. The pendulum swinging back to surface water is important. So I've seen it all. I worked at Westlands Water District for a few years. And then I've been here 10 years. Worked for GCID. I put three kids through school up here. I see this as my home. And everything I do here is for the benefit of this region and the district I work for.
So I have over 30 years experience primarily in dams and hydropower. And it's all been, well, for the most part, in Northern California. So I started my career as an engineer. I graduated from UC Berkeley as a civil engineer. But I've also gone and run construction crews for hydropower projects and then got into project management. I've been managing projects in the billion-dollar class for several years now. And again, background in design, construction, and the management of these projects, all in here in Northern California. And I think probably the last couple of years was, or since 2004, involved in the water issues from the Delta down the San Joaquin as well as up into the Sacramento and into the tributaries.
That's good, Jim. I didn't realize you were a Bear, so I just want to say go Bears. We're 3-0 right now, so that's good. Next up, what do we have the next? If you guys can tee them up, maybe one after the other, so we can go right. Go ahead.
Gary Merlo, almond farmer. I got involved in these water issues in the last year. Ammon farmers get a lot of bad PR for the alleged overuse of water. So I've been going down to these CWC meetings. There is like about 12 people on average. I went to that Davis meeting, so there was about 11, 12 people there. And at that meeting, they wanted to have the Northern California meeting in Napa. But the best thing about with only 11 people, your voice is heard. So I said they should probably come to Chico, but they're kind of afraid of Chico after the last showing. So please come to Yuba City. And also another part of this is the CWC has stakeholder meetings once a month in Sacramento. I was literally the only person there at these last, just a concerned citizen. It's all different special interest groups, tribal groups, environmental groups. There's the Farm Bureau. But please go to these meetings. You'll see how long they spend on definitions, on the tributaries. They wanted to add Tulare Basin, which hasn't flown toward the Delta in 108 years. So you have to get these, you have to have your voice heard. So please come to these meetings. They're all day, and they let you talk at the end, before lunch and at the end of the meeting. So I encourage you all to come. Just check their website, and it has their the schedule and everything. Thank you.
Thank you for that additional background. The stakeholder meetings are another important thing as well. So thank you.
I'm sorry about my voice. My name is Tom Nickel, and I'm from Chico. And I talked with some ranchers over on the west side, and the question is what are you going to do about the 35% evaporation rate at this project? And that the 20-year-old geological study said that the ground is not set aside or able to handle this type of magnitude of water, and that the seepage can be a problem. And also, the fact is that you have the coastal fracture zones from those earthquakes. Example is when Napa started having these last series of earthquakes due to the fact is the ground subsidence. Now, if we're pumping our groundwater out to fill this reservoir, if that's true, is what are you going to do with the area where those fault lines run across that coastal range and impact Maxwell and Williams when it goes?
Okay, I think that's a question for Jim, but I do want to point out there won't be any groundwater used to fill Sites Reservoir. It will be filled with winter flows out of the Sacramento River and pumped into Sites Reservoir. So, Jim?
Yeah, so, well, let's start off with the studies by the Bureau of Reclamation and Department of Water Resources go back to the Eisenhower administration. And throughout those studies, they have conducted geologic studies, also looking at the earthquake faulting. They have concluded that this location is stable and suitable for a dam. We have had our consultants look at it, and they also concur that this dam can be built safely and operated reliably, given the geology, that it is perfectly suited for these dams, or for the terrain. Did I answer your question? Yeah, evaporation occurs with basically every reservoir, any surface storage reservoir. We are looking at strategies to manage that, just like every other reservoir operator in the state, because it is an opportunity for an efficiency improvement.
Yeah, the other thing on just evaporation is right now the average evaporation is about 40,000 acre feet. So out of a 500,000 acre feet, it's not quite 10%. The other thing is there's two natural small creeks that are there, and those two creeks actually have about that same amount of inflow to evaporation. I think the annual average inflow from the two creeks that would be now blocked by Sites Reservoir, they're ephemeral streams. They run about 3 months out of the year with peak flows. I think it's about 30,000 acre feet of runoff we get out of those, so it almost neutralizes the amount of evaporation.
Todd Kimmelshoe from a local farm family and also an agricultural banker. Two real quick questions. If the permit process goes as planned, when would ground be broke for the Sites Dam, and then when would it be completed? And the second question is, if there's further delays, how much more will it cost us?
Okay, I think as you know, large water projects take decades. So the state and the federal government have spent decades working on it. We're going to be ready by January of 2017 to have our proposal. Assuming we get that grant funding, it will take 3 to 4 years for the final environmental documents, which is an opportunity for the public to comment again on and help shape this project, then go through final design. Construction is estimated to be 5 to 6 years. So unfortunately, as fast as we move, it's an 8 to 10 year process to begin with. Now, regarding the costs or the potential for overrun, I think everybody knows mega projects do have a potential to overrun. But a lot of it starts with projects that are overly optimistic on everything going right. And in terms of they overestimate the yield from the project and they lowball the construction costs. On this project, we're carrying about 40% contingency on top of the direct construction costs. So we feel we have a good margin for what is unknown and what could affect the project, including accounting for the cost of schedule delay.
And I'll just piggyback on that. I'm looking for 5 years. That's what I'd like to see. And here's what we need to do. One of the biggest impediments to getting these projects off the ground is the CEQA process right now, which is abused to stop projects. And we need to have a process that allows input to be taken in on a project so that you're making environmentally sound decisions, but it's a streamlined process. And we've done this. Guess who we've done this for? The Sacramento Kings, so that they could build a new arena. And when I drive down to Sacramento, I see this thing going right up. You know, they've done this for a stadium down in LA. And guess what? In legislature this year, we did it for the new world champion Golden State Warriors. Streamlined CEQA process for their new arena in San Francisco. So we know how to do it. And part of what my bill was, AB 311, was to do it for these water storage projects, and that would help these projects get off the ground quicker. We're going to continue to work on that. Thanks.
Let me grab on that too, because it's one of my greatest frustrations forever. And the hypocrisy of some who take these kinds of projects that are not for the generations, okay? Maybe they're kind of cool, but the hypocrisy of the colleagues that we have, James and I and Doug, that vote for exemptions for their little pet projects, but they don't think of the impact on the generations. That's short-sightedness. That's hypocrisy. Now, what can we do about that? Just as you have done here tonight, you show out in great strength, testifying and showing your support for this kind of storage. That gives us some ammunition to take back to Sacramento and stress the importance to a lot of people. We have, in addition, allies that we never have had before. The farm workers. I've testified 3 times this year before the Water Resources Control Board. On 2 of those occasions, over 200 farm workers came up or down to Sacramento to be present in that room. Now, I knew that they were not all going to get to speak, in fact, hardly any. So I spoke on their behalf. But their appeal is compelling. And though it's in self-interest, traditional labor are very supportive of these projects. So I am trying, and others, to stir them up, to get them to help us expedite the construction that's going to fix things for our children and our grandchildren.
All right. There is a streak of bipartisan support. There is a broad support, as Jim mentioned. There's project labor union folks want to get in on this and build things for California. This is beneficial to everybody. So what we need not happen is when we're at to that point where the permit process is about through, then we get a bunch of environmental lawsuits to come in and try and stop it. The permit process is supposed to be vetting that. The public meeting period is supposed to be vetting that. Then these last-minute lawsuits where people can actually make money off of them, where they basically sue and settle. I mean, for crying out loud, here we are towards the end of the summer, early fall, watching our forests go up in smoke. We need to be salvaging forest wood, and yet every single time we act like salvaging forests to get the trees out while they still have value within that 6 months to a year is this new environmental thing we have to litigate. Boom, the litigation takes over a year, and then you lose the value of the forest. In this case here, all it does is drive up the cost of building the project, which I think most people are going to, at one time or another, agree we need this project. And yet, why do we have to have these additional costs when a broad basis of people want this project? Those that would build it, those who would benefit from the water, environmentally, ag, everybody. I mean, this is going to help, again, the whole water pie, as James called it, in the entire state. You expand that pie, takes pressure off the cities, ag, environment, everything.
Yeah, my name's Ray Schimmel. I've been in Chico since 1947. And for nearly 50 years, I've worked with rice and almond orchardists and whatnot. And I'm well aware of the constant need to get those wells down deeper and deeper. Are we, in fact, drawing on the Tuscan aquifer, and is it in distress?
I think that'd probably be a better question for maybe either Thad or Jim on.
Well, I think we've seen both, whether it's in the Tuscan or the Tehama. I think just the groundwater system in general, there's been additional stress put on it, at least the last couple of years in drought. But, you know, I think there's also just new demands put on it. You know, I think in this county alone, there's been 18,000 acres more permanent crops planted in the last 10 years. So you average out, that's a 500,000 acre feet that's been pulled out of the aquifer system just by those new plantings. And where's that water coming from? So, you know, I think obviously folks have criticized our district and our landowners, but I think everybody needs to look at, you know, everybody has a part in that, and everybody's going to have a part in the solution as well. And I think, again, we see sites as being integral to bringing in supplies to get folks off groundwater. You know, if that's the way that we can get more surface water delivered, that keeps our groundwater in the bank, and it won't get so pushed in these types of dry years.
And it's another argument for more surface storage that we could use for recharge. Understand also domestic wells. There are a lot more human beings. Population has grown. Municipal wells are drawing. That's why we can't just conserve ourselves into the future.
Southern California has proven that you can get desalination of water in the cities down there, and it's good tasting and it can be clean. And so I'm wondering why they don't do that more than do all this other stuff of bringing our water down there. And they can ship that water from those cities along the ocean that can send it up to the upper cities. So why do we take the chance that since they've already killed Central California, they might now kill Northern California?
Real quick, I'll take a crack at that. I know there is money in the water bond, not in the $2.7 billion for water storage, but there is money to support desalination projects. And there actually are some going on. There's one down in San Diego in the Carlsbad area where they're hoping to bring that online soon. I agree with you. Desal is a big part of this. It's a big part of what we need to do in the future.
Can I add something to that, James?
I'm going to get up on that a little bit too. Okay, this is a pretty big one to me as well, because there's a movement underway right now and I'm checking on how serious this is, but to put the high-speed rail money back on the ballot, okay? The $10 billion in bonds, so some of it's been wasted already, and take that money and place it over towards desal, okay? Now, desal is expensive water, okay? It could never really work for ag water, but since most of the population in California is on the coast, and the coastal folks, newer homes are using only about half an acre foot per house, especially after all this yard, they're killing their lawns now, or at least some of them are. We're getting down where they're getting pretty efficient in their urban homes as well. So we're getting to the point where desal can start to look a little more economically feasible. Desal is expensive because it uses a high amount of electricity. So the more we're doing to put cost-effective, low-cost electricity plants in California, whether that would be natural gas, since natural gas costs have gone down so much, or keeping our hydroelectric power plants in place, That low-cost power is what will help make desal work. Again, the Pacific Ocean, for the time being, looks like it's going to be an almost drought-proof source. The people, the people live along the coast. The proximity to that, give them the power plants, give them the desal, give them the permitting to do that, and take this boondoggle high-speed rail money away. I don't think anybody wants it anymore. If that was back on the ballot, it would fail badly. I'm sure of it. And if they say, look, let's move this money towards getting more desal going, I think we'd have a win-win going there. So the desal will help take care of the coastal folks. Guess what pressure that relieves on us in the inland, okay? They'll have a drought-proof source of water. It's not perfect, it's not cheap, but as they keep working on technology for the filtration system, the membrane that they use to separate salt from water, that will bring the cost down as well. But there's always the idea too, we're letting a lot of fresh water get out to the ocean that gets salt in it. Why don't we keep the fresh water fresh and not have to take the salt out that's getting out through the delta? Okay.
Keep in mind, too, the point of Assemblyman Gallagher's CEQA bill. That project in Southern California, desalination, took either it's 15 or 17 years. 15 to 17 years. So there's a CEQA problem even with that. And I agree with that train. We don't need a train. We need water.
Yes, I have a question. That's Ted Sandrowski. Today it was mentioned on the news in Southern California, there's 10 water districts down there that are considering doing a recycled of basically toilet water for Southern California. It's an over $1 billion project. They would need storage for that. My question is would that money, that $1 billion there, be money that could be siphoned off of the water bond?
Could that be siphoned off? No, I don't believe that that would even come close to meeting the test of the statute. That aspect of a beneficial use, no, I don't. Now, anything can happen with lawyers, okay? But I do not think that that would be a prospect. We would have other competing threats for that surface water, and there are those who do covet it. But I just don't think that that's one of the prospects that would be a threat to us.
I think it's pretty clear in the proposition language that to be eligible for funds, you need to have a measurable improvement to the delta. So Southern California, with that toilet to tap, would have to somehow cut their water use or export south, which I have not seen or heard. So it would, unless they could demonstrate a measurable improvement, they would not be allowed or eligible for these grant funds. They could use other grants that the state has.
Is it already gone? Okay.
My name is Jim Brobeck. I'm a water policy analyst for Aqua Alliance. I want to acknowledge the efforts of Thad Bettner and Jim Watson for moving from their managerial positions at Westlands Water District to come up here and help guide our irrigation districts in developing a robust water supply for the market. Congressman LaMalfa mentioned the draft sites feasibility study that must be finalized prior to submitting a shovel-ready project to the Water Commission. I want to know, what is the status of that feasibility study? Is it available for public review so that we could see what we're supposed to support? Did the study investigate the potential for leaching coast-range selenium, boron, and mercury into the water supply? Who will own the water stored in Sites Reservoir? And will GSID continue to sell surplus water and construct supplemental groundwater infrastructure during the 5 to 25 years that it might take to get sites delivering water?
Okay, there's several questions in there, and I think maybe Doug and Jim and Thad might be able to all answer those different questions here.
Okay, and I think I got at least the first two. So the status of the feasibility study is it is in a draft form, with the Sites Project Authority being the lead for the project. We are in the process of developing our alternative that we want to be the proposed project. So the feasibility study will be available when we submit our proposal. Matter of fact, all the information that we submit for our grant proposal will be publicly available, including what will be an administrative draft environmental document which will address the issue of leaching of minerals. And I believe the current admin draft under the state's proposal has shown that the leaching is less than significant. It is not a concern, at least from their analysis. But with the Sites Project Authority, one of our actions is, as we move this project forward, is to make sure we agree or concur with those prior studies, and if not, we incorporate the new information and science into the new project. You had a couple other comment or topic areas? Well, right now, the public benefit water would be owned by the state of California, by us, or you. It would be used for public purposes. It will be under contract. We will be under contract to the Department of Fish and Wildlife and the State Water Resources Control Board for that 200 to 250,000 acre feet that they will want managed for the public benefit. The other half is by the agencies that are paying for the construction of the dam, and as I mentioned, we have 130,000 acre feet in the Sacramento Valley, so that's local water agencies and districts that will own essentially the half that is going to water supply. Did that answer all your questions?
When will the draft or the final study be available for the public to view before we plan on building this project?
Unfortunately, it will be when the proposal to the Water Commission is when you'll see the feasibility study, because we're in the process of developing an alternative that is specific for the Sites Project Authority. And just so you are all aware, the current documentation from the state, the facilities look very similar, but they did not include a source of water supply to remain in the Sacramento Valley. So under the CEQA and NEPA requirements, we have to update all that information to show how the operations by providing water, keeping water in the Sacramento Valley provides a benefit or any particular impacts. So that's what we're working on over the next year so that we have it ready to go into our proposal. I wish I could give you an earlier date, but for us to get that through that process, the CEQA plus the engineering process, it's going to take us over a year.
Yeah, adding to that, also the locals there are providing significant funding in order to carry the ball at this time of preliminaries on this, and so that's an important component that people need to understand, is that they're self-starting on this, and with many acre feet already spoken for by people in the neighborhood, they've stepped up to the plate with commitments to help pay for the half that would be the private water. So there's public-private water happening here. The legislation that we're working on, either the broader legislation 2898 that's already over in the Senate, would seek to take keep spurring the studies on, but accept the study at the end of it, and then authorize moving forward the project, either the broader bill, or if that should somehow be waylaid, then my own legislation with Mr. Garamendi, 1060, we would authorize the project, which allows on the federal side of the legislation the federal agencies to then engage in the process of what they would be doing to be permitting, etc. So we want to have that all tied up on our end, ready to go by really the fall of 2016, so we're not here last minute in December of 2016 when the California Water Commission starts meeting. And of course the JPA is doing very good work locally on that as well. And I'll read you back.
Yeah, one more. My final question, will GSIC continue to sell surplus water while they develop supplemental groundwater supplies?
Okay, last question there, and then we got to get to some other questions.
Well, first of all, let me. I think it's important to put that in context because continue is really a false statement. As I mentioned, let me just put some numbers, and we're gonna put this out on our website because I think it's important to everybody in this public have numbers from us versus hearing it secondhand. So I am gonna make sure we have information out that everybody can look at. But as I mentioned earlier, you know, we've imported into our district the last 10 years about 7.4 million acre feet of water that's been used by our growers, and portion of that has been recharged. Yeah, twice the size of Shasta, right? We've used that in our growers. We've delivered a portion of that water to private refuge lands. We've also delivered about 718,000 acre feet to the refuges over that period. We've spent $32 million over that period purchasing water to bring into our district in order to not pump groundwater. This year, we bought water for $130 an acre foot. I'm not sure anybody in this room paid $130 an acre foot for water they either bought, surface water, or they pumped groundwater. But that's what we did because it's the right thing to do for this region. The last 10 years, we have transferred about 100,000 acre feet. So that's an average of 10,000 acre feet a year. Of that, only 18,000 acre feet was groundwater through groundwater substitution. And of that 10,000 acre feet, we served to the west side of us, the TC Canal, who had a 0% water supply. So these numbers need to get out. And if you're hearing that somehow we're pumping groundwater and it's causing you impacts and you think it's going somewhere else and people are making it, it's just flat wrong. We're going to correct that. I encourage you to look at our website. I encourage you to call me. I would love to sit down with you, but it's important that some of the things you're hearing are not correct. It's important to have a correct record. It's important to be honest and factual, and that's what we do as a district for our landowners, for our board, and for this region.
Could you explain to me just real quick? It seems to me that there's we had several options here, and the Sites Dam was the final option. Could you explain the different options that you looked at, such as groundwater recharge, the Sites Dam? Were there any other options or anything as far as answering this problem?
I wish I could answer your question with more knowledge. I've been on the job for 5 weeks. I do know that the early studies by both the state and federal under the CalFed era, I believe, looked at over 100 different options for storage of various different combinations, and they concluded that the 4 projects that should go forward were Sites, Temperance Flat, Los Vaqueros, and I believe one in the Delta. But I believe that prior information should be available on the DWR website. I wish I had more information to give you, and I apologize.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that, so the water bond, the $2.7 billion, there will be many applications submitted to the Water Commission for that, to take advantage of that money. One of those is the Sites Reservoir project. So there'll be a lot of different projects that'll be vying for that money. I think, you know, what we're saying here is that out of all the projects that are out there that would help provide the biggest bang for our buck in terms of adding new water to the system, Sites is the best one. And it has multiple benefits, which we talked about. It's been studied for 50 years, so this isn't something new. It's something that's been studied over and over again, that people have agreed this is a good, solid project. And to the groundwater recharge question, I think it proposes a great opportunity to recharge the west side of the valley, where we have seen some major groundwater problems. If you're storing that water, 1.3 million acre feet in that area, that water there is going to be seepage. It's going to go into the groundwater, and it's going to help support the west side of the valley as well. So I believe there's recharge benefits to this project in addition to the water supply benefits.
I appreciate your dedication to protecting our region. It is apparent that it is near and dear to your hearts as it is to the people here. I did a little research in preparation for the meeting and realized that the capacity that we have in our reservoirs for California is equal to the amount of water that we use annually. And so my concern is that if we use reservoirs to be our defense against a drought, that we will end up losing more quickly than we will be able to sustain ourselves. My concern has to do with how we're really going to be investing in our future in terms of limited financial resources. And it seems to me that if storing water in a drought situation, and I've also looked at some tree ring studies of the western states, and they indicate that we have had two 200-year-long droughts. So this drought of 4 years may be just the beginning. And so my concern has to do with a long-term solution. And it seems that we really need to decrease the demand on our water needs. And that, of course, is throughout the state. Although I am totally sympathetic with the ability for people to continue to farm, that's an obviously important thing for human beings to live. It seems to me that trying to store water in a reservoir is a short-term solution, where a long-term solution would be doing things like use of recycled water, rain catchment, and I'm not talking about reservoirs, I'm talking about some systems where you're storing water that you can use later, as well as gray water systems that we build into our infrastructure. So why is there no thinking about going into long-term solutions to deal with a long-term drought?
Shasta Dam's been around since 1937. That sounds pretty long-term to me. Lake Oroville's been around since 1968. That's pretty long-term. But there's nothing wrong with recycling. It's been used pretty effectively, especially in urban areas, and that's a good thing. Conservation, using less, those are all good things. But look at the condition of the lakes. Now, they're not going to fill anytime soon, but we're expecting we will get a rain and a snow cycle again. If we're expecting we're never going to get any rain again, we don't want to build any infrastructure, then I guess we've got a lot bigger problems than what we were talking about here tonight. So we're counting on rain happening once again in California. So I think these are all long-term solutions. Again, we've the streams have enjoyed the benefit of Lake Shasta for almost 80 years, and Oroville for 50 years. So these are long-term. It's all on the table. I don't know why we have to differentiate between it. If we're building a desal plant on the coast, and that plant lasts for 100 years, well, that sounds long-term to me as well. So we're getting into a little game of semantics here. We need to be putting all these things on the table, continuing to do better at them. You know, and in crops, people are using more and more drip irrigation. They're getting more. I mean, the almonds that are being planted. There's a lot of fuss about almonds in California, and the trees that are going back in, they're doing underground technology that uses even less water. So if they've pushed out 100,000 acres of almonds, let's say in the valley, and you've planted back 5,000, those 5,000 acres of trees are using a lot less water per acre than what had even been pushed out, because they're getting more and more efficient. Same thing happening with rice, and so we're looking at a lot of ways to improve as we go along. So we need not be trying to divide ourselves on saying, well, this one's bad, this one's good. We need to be doing all of them, because the surface water that we've had, you know, Lake Oroville, I just saw a picture of it yesterday where it's, you know, I drove up to it. We've enjoyed the storage of Lake Oroville for 4 years of drought when we had, remember that record snowfall 4 or 5 years ago, whatever it was, snowpack? We've been managed as a state with that and the other projects to get through 4 years. Had those not existed, what would be happening to our aquifers at this point? What would be happening to the Colorado River or any other source that we have? We'd be in dire trouble if we had not had the foresight to have those reservoirs in place that have been the kind of the stretching of the rubber band that we need to get through the low times. We can't rely on, you know, once you've conserved, but there's air coming out of your spigot, you can't conserve anymore.
I know we have.
I'm sorry.
Conservation will be a constant, okay? And this particular drought will make all of us much more conservation aware in the future. That's good. But for the last several decades, and I mean the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, and the 2000s, water policy in this state has been based on the sharing of scarcity. That really hasn't worked very well. And it's time now to add to that box of options surface storage. It's very simple. All of those options are important, but surface storage is more so now than ever before if you're going to worry about your grandchildren. Conservation alone will not get us there.
Hello, this is Stan Cleveland. I'm actually Yuba City Council member, and also served as a
board member of Sutter County with James Gallagher. I want to encourage everybody. He's talking about that CEQA bill he's wanting to get support for. We must get behind that because we've already been through this in Sutter and Butte County on getting a regulatory process shortened by many years. Our West Feather River Levee project was a pilot project. We worked very hard and diligently, got the support of the people behind it. We proved that we could be trusted. Federal government believed us. That levee system is now being done. And we were told it would take 15 years to get our feasibility study done and stuff. Well, now we were the model for doing it in less than 3 years. We had a project in 5 years. Now, in a total of 6 years, it's going to be complete. Over $300 million project. It can be done. It's been done, like you said, for sports complexes. Come on now. I mean, this is our livelihood we're talking about. We need it for water and storage. So get behind that. My other item was on fish. The concerns that are out there for this panel is to get out there for the fishermen, the commercial, and the recreational fish. He's talking about the salmonoids. They're very concerned that this water will be too warm for the spawning further downstream. So they're very concerned about the operation of that. I think on the 21st, I'm going to bring a delegation there. They're going to twist my arm, so I'm going to have to bring them in on that one. But the operation of it, what do you have in place for that?
Thank you, Stan. It's been a pleasure working with you. And maybe Thad, or Jim, could you address that question?
So regarding the temperature, the salmon typically, their historic spawning grounds were above the rim reservoirs, above Shasta, above Oroville, above Folsom, above Bullard's Bar. So the water, that's the importance of the cold water pool. That's really one of the benefits that Sites provides, as I showed in my slide, that cold water pool to improve the salmon. They migrate through the area where Sites exists. They're not spawning, so we don't have the concern about endangering them. It's within the normal temperature range that they're accustomed to. Yes, Sites will be warmer temperature water, but some of that water will be used locally. I think the rice farmers would prefer to use some of that water for them than taking it out of the river. So that would leave water in the Sacramento River colder if they're using some of the warmer Sites water. Now, we're not going to be able to handle 100%, because half that water is going to public benefits that include in the Delta, but it is within the normal range of temperature.
I know, real quick before we get to the next question, I just want to remind people again, I know some people are starting to leave, and if you have to go, we understand. But be sure to pick up these materials. These could really be helpful in helping build that public support. Again, we have the flyer about the upcoming public meeting with the Water Commission. We have a draft letter that you could use to help provide input to the Water Commission. And there's also these cards that have information on the different agencies involved with the project. So, and next question here.
James? Yeah. Les Herringer, farm manager. I just wonder what some of your peers in Sacramento are thinking. What water is going to go in those twin tunnels that they're proposing to put under the Delta in a dry year without additional storage in California? Where is that water going to come from that they're going to fill those tunnels with to send south?
Well, that is the exact fear, Les, that we've talked about for many years, is the target on our water rights. I can't see any other source that they're going to try and take that from unless they're going to take it from Northern California surface water rights holders. And when they do that, if they do that, that affects everything up here. It affects farming, it affects our cities and towns, it affects our groundwater tables because more people will have to pump because their surface water will be taken. So the twin tunnels is it's a non-starter with all of us. And I can tell you we're building a lot of support across the aisle. There's a lot of folks down in the northern Central Valley who don't like that project either. Adam Gray being one of them, several others in the Assembly that we've been talking to, Bill Dodd. So we're definitely building a bipartisan support to stop the tunnels. They're still trying to push it, but I think as Senator Nielsen said, I think it's going to die on its own weight they're starting to lose people that can help fund that project. And Jerry Brown's trying to make the mitigation smaller to help push that off, but that's caused all other problems with other groups. So it's got a lot of problems. We're going to continue to fight against that project, and I think we've got some good support to help do it.
Couple things here. First of all, on this card, if I didn't get this written on here, but if you want to help with something too, would you all, here's something, action thing you can do besides contacting these folks. Would you call Senator Feinstein's office for me, please, too? That bill is over in the Senate, and ask her, and she's professed she wants to help with water in California, so let's help her along on that a little bit too. Also, and Jim down here, maybe you can help me on this a little bit too, but that my understanding, and even during this drought period, yes, we do get some flows down the Sacramento during the river, even during, because we have had some rainfall. Had sites been in place, even during this drought period, we would have had available, and Jim, help me with the number here, I think another 800,000 to 900,000 acre feet of water, even in drought period, could have been stored over the particular period of time had sites already been in place. So even in the bad times, if we're getting some flow, jump in on that, please. What's it?
Yeah, it was 400,000 averaged over the 2 years. So actually this year we could have, because of the storm patterns, increased that amount. But 400 is a good average. Yeah, per year.
Go ahead. Okay. Hi, my name's Chuck Greenwood. I live in Durham. I got more grandchildren and children and great-grandchildren than I can count without taking off my shoes and socks, and that's the only reason I have for being here. Basically, what I would like to do is address this to the people up in front here, who I don't know who they are, all of them, who are elected. We're living in a political context these days. We all know that a lot of people are a little bit angry about what goes on, as evidenced by the polls for Mr. Trump and Senator Sanders. What I would like is for you gentlemen to reassure me somehow, if you can, that what is spent on this with water bond money or whatever money comes flowing down does not wind up in the pockets of legislators and the rest of us wind up with drier wells. I am skeptical as to whether your ability to do that, but I'd sure love to hear what you got.
Well, you know, I think the best reassurance you have is we are you. Jim Nielsen, Doug LaMalfa, and James Gallagher live here. We're a part of this North State. We answer to you all the time that we're in elective office, and all the time that before we came to be in elective office, we are a part of this program. Our children and our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren are here as well. And in terms of being good stewards, I sort of am a self-appointed. As vice chairman of the budget committee, I certainly pay a lot of attention to what goes on in our budget. And in terms of being dissatisfied with what goes on in Sacramento, folks, if you were down there as James and I are, or as Doug was, or in Washington, you'd probably be even more upset to see from the inside. But the whole point that I will make, and the reason that I went off the farm and started devoting a lot of time to being involved in leadership many, many years ago, is I realized someone else was being the architect of my destiny, and I didn't like that. And I decided I better stand up to the doggone plate and get out on the field. It ain't a lot of fun sometimes, but that's where you need to be. The reassurance that we would offer to you, and I say that in good conscience from all three of us, we're of and one with you. And that's why I think you can have some trust. And I can say that we both, James and I in Sacramento, see some progress in this last year. There's a little bit of glimmer of hope.
I'll just pipe in there real quick. It's a sacred trust that I've been given, that we've been given as your representatives down there. I take that very seriously. And I can tell you one thing I've always remembered as I've gone down there is that nobody in Sacramento votes for me. People back here vote for me, and they trust me, and they've given their trust to me, and I owe it to them to fight for their interests, not anybody else's. So when I make decisions, I am thinking about you. I mean, I'm a 6th generation in this Sacramento Valley. I'm raising the 7th. I'm hoping to have a whole gaggle of grandchildren myself, you know, down the road, and I want them to be able to grow up here and be in a prosperous valley that I enjoyed growing up. And so I think about that all the time, and I thank you for the question. It's something that I keep very close to my heart. Who do we have next here? Yes, sir.
My name is Lou Checky. I live in Oroville, and I would like to commend your gentleman's efforts on the Sites Reservoir. I support it wholeheartedly. I spent 22 years on the South Feather Power and Water Agency, which regulates 5 dams. And my question is about the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. I've seen an environmental and a regulatory nightmare on trying to get South Feather relicensed, along with Lake Oroville, and the millions of dollars that have been spent. Back in 2008, we were made assurances that the FERC would have a streamlined process for granting new licenses to dams and new dams. And at South Feather Power and Water, we started that process in 2008. We spent close to $10 million. We still don't have a license. Lake Oroville started that process several years before, and they've spent many, many millions of dollars having gone through the nightmare. My question is, how is Sites going to be affected by going through the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission?
That's a really good question. I have worked on projects related that have a FERC license, and I think every water agency in the foothills has experienced delays and added cost in getting the licensing done. Right now, we have options that we're looking at that do not include a hydropower component, so we would be exempt from their license. We have alternatives that do include it, and we know that would be required a license. What we're trying to evaluate is the benefits of the hydropower as sustainable energy relative to the risk or the cost of working under the FERC license. And that's a discussion that we are just starting to have. We are looking at the renewable energy market and the governor's goal to decarbonize the state, which actually would put additional pressure on creating pump storage, and that is something Sites could do. But we're going to look at it specifically for what are we getting into in terms of the license. And I've worked with a number of the agencies that have FERC licenses up in the foothills, and their experiences are helping to inform us on what is the right decision for this project.
Now, I'll jump in on the legislative side. It's appalling to me that Jim even has to contemplate that you would not use free falling water coming out of the full dam that's going to go back into the river system to turn turbines in the process. That's asinine, okay? That they would even have to contemplate that the FERC licensing would be such a hassle, so much cost, so much delay over the overall project. Hydroelectric power is the greenest power you can get. It's renewable. The state just passed a mandate the other day despite the best efforts of these fellows here, that renewable power will have to be 50% of the grid by year. What is it, Jim? 2030?
But we're not going to count water.
But we already don't count all the hydro in California. That was one of the first bills I carried in the Assembly, is that all hydro should count as renewable. But if the power plant is over 30 megawatts, it doesn't count. Isn't that an asinine, folks? So we need to have the ability, and I will be working federally to get FERC in line on this, because the environmental work's already being done out of the chute on the project here. FERC gets their, well, other people take advantage of FERC relicensing to get their hooks in to get things when they're renewing, relicensing an existing plant, like with Oroville, or especially like up on Klamath. People line up like it's a smorgasbord of stuff they want to get free in the process. It has nothing to do with relicensing an existing power plant that's making good hydropower. If we're going to have this mandate for additional green power, we need to get real about this. And so I'll be working to try to fix FERC's attitude on this, as well as make them a little less lawsuit open in this process as well, because this shouldn't even be a decision for them. It's like, of course you want a hydro plant as part of that, because you got free water running out there that's going to turn turbines and help charge the grid.
He's coming. Go ahead.
Oh,
Go ahead, sir.
Thank you guys for being here today, and I'm here. Let me get it. Oh, you got it. Anyways, I believe Sites should be built. You know, it's overdue. We do need the surface water. But we have to have assurances that you know, you will fill it during the wet years, and that there will be a minimum amount of water going down the river, you know, at all times. I think the only way we're going to save Northern California is to stop the privatization of a resource like water, take it out of the hands of private individuals using senior water rights to sell water to people to the south. Very important. They said 1.8 million acre feet is what this reservoir would hold. Okay, they've been selling water, Feather River, for $700 an acre foot here. It's worth $2,100 an acre foot in San Diego. Well, at $2,100 an acre foot times 1.8 million acre foot, which is what Sites would hold, if you were to take that, take away the privatization of the water and the states sell it, it's $3,700,000,000, which is one time the reservoir is full. Why can't that be paid back to taxpayers instead of bond measures? You know, and it would stop the gold rush of selling water, a resource. You know, it's the only way we're going to save ourselves. And there's no transparency. We hear about water sellers and water buyers. That's all we hear. There's no transparency. I have read where there were laws passed to hide their identities. I'd like to know why those laws, if those laws were passed, why those laws were passed, who passed them, and, you know, it's just, we have to have transparency.
Well, first of all, I want to say I appreciate your concerns that you've raised, and I appreciate that you're supportive of Sites Reservoir and you recognize that there's a need to increase our water supply. I can't agree with you in terms of saying that we should take away the private rights to water and make it public. Probably the first reason being is, guess who's going to become the owner of those water rights? The state of California. And do you think they're going to be thinking about the Northern California needs when they decide how that water is allocated? No. And I think the other thing that people need to understand is that senior water rights are very important. And those senior water rights get used right here in Northern California. There are water sales, there are surface water transfers, but the vast majority of that surface water that people have as senior water rights, it gets used right here in the valley. You know, I think Thad pointed that out, how much water is actually even imported into this valley in terms of the water that's used, surface water, that's used over Glen Cluse Irrigation District. And that's water that helps recharge our groundwater basins, that helps grow crops and helps improve our economy here. So I don't, you know, you wouldn't want to take a measure like that where you're putting that power in the hands of the, you know, the state. You know, that's really who they mean when they say the public. And I don't think they would make the same decisions that our private water rights holders have made that benefit this valley. So I don't know if somebody else wants to speak to that issue, though.
I can't resist that one. I'm the founder of the California Alliance to Protect Private Property Rights, and water is a private property right. Now, anyone who feels comfort in the state taking control of anything like that over your lives, well, you haven't dealt with the state enough. In fact, in the last 2 years, pursuant to legislation that I vigorously oppose, past tense and plural will oppose, the Water Board, under the guise of this drought emergency declared by the governor 2 years ago, legislation passed in a drought emergency to give the governor a broader ability to declare a drought emergency. And when that happened, then the Water Board had more authority to usurp historic water rights, including pre-1914 water rights. Now, they made a big deal then later that year of saying, well, we have to stop some of the junior water rights, water right holders. We're going to take their water, but we're going to protect the senior and the pre-14. But we do have the ability. They admitted what the statute said. They have the ability. And this year they did usurp those pre-14 rights. Sir, those protect all of us, not just those who hold the water rights. And it is very important not to compromise it. If you own a domestic well, now pursuant to legislation, the water police may be coming out unless the counties, they still have authority. The counties still have authority, but the state now has an ability to even usurp the counties in terms of our groundwater. And here come the groundwater police to police your domestic well and tell you how many hours you can pump your domestic well or your industrial well or your municipal well. No, I tell you, I'd never trust the state.
Let me have a piece of that. Now, on the federal side, okay, if I'm just hearing that somebody wants to take away a private property right that and turn it over to the state government or the federal government, I give you the Social Security Trust Fund that's going to go bankrupt in 2033 if we don't do something about it. I give you the $18.4 trillion national debt. If the federal government was in charge of the Sahara Desert, it would run out of sand within 10 years. Okay? The VA system, the shameful treatment of our veterans by an outfit that can't run the VA system. Now we want it to run the entire health care, but I digress.
But a really good point that you brought up is, and all good points, is that we're letting that water go right down the system right now. And one of the great things about Sites is that we'll start using that water instead of just letting it run down the system.
So I heard we only have time.
We're running out of time here, so can we do 2 more questions? We will be here to talk afterwards as well. So if you want to talk to us directly, anybody, we'll stay around here for a little bit, but 2 more questions. Go ahead.
I have a question for the congressman. That a lot of people are frustrated at the federal level because that the pot people are getting more and more rights. What about the farmers? Don't you think we should give the water to the farmers to grow our food instead of giving it to the pot growers to go ahead and get high?
Well, real quick on that question, it is a big issue. There's actually been a lot of cases of illegal diversions of water by marijuana growers up in the foothills and in the national forests. And they've actually started a pilot program right up here in Butte County and I believe in Tehama County as well, Shasta County, where Department of Fish and Wildlife and the Department of Water Resources is going after these people and regulating them. We're trying to introduce 2 people that we've had problems with, criminal marijuana growers who are illegally diverting and regulators. We don't really like both of these guys. We're trying to introduce them to each other. And it's really a great program, I think it might work out really well, so thank you for the question. All right. I know we had a question here that she's had her hand up for a long time. Do you want to just go ahead?
Thank you very much. First of all, I want you to clarify. We need to keep friends across the aisle in many ways, and the Sierra Club has been strongly opposed to the twin tunnels. So I want you to know that, and that we can work with them. And I'm from the Sierra Club, so I should know. I also wanted, what I'm concerned about, Sigma is 20 years away, and the project is 10 years away. In the meantime, a lot of groundwater depletion and a lot of transfers could be done that would make our situation so much worse. So I'm hoping that you can tell me how you are dealing with those possibilities before we run out of more water. And then also, to be more supportive of sites, it seems to me that if we had guarantees about the water not being transferred out of this area, that would be very, very helpful. Because I think there's a lot of suspicion about, well, what if there is a twin tunnels, for example, or other huge demands by very wealthy southern interests, if they're going to pay us huge sums of money for our water, what's going to guarantee that we're not going to ship our Sites water down there? And and what's going to guarantee that our groundwater is not going to be used in Sites? What guarantees and full transparency assurances can you give us, please? Thank you very much.
Yeah, well, and let me take first crack at this because, first of all, thank you for being here. You know, and I really hope that Sierra Club becomes a partner in helping to build Sites Reservoir, because I think, as you heard here, there's a lot of multi-benefits to this project that are good for a lot of environmental issues, you know, in this state. And one of them being groundwater recharge, as we talked about. You know, the best way that we can help protect our groundwater resource up in the Sacramento Valley is to ensure that we have a reliable surface water supply. If we lose that because the target's on our back and we have the state taking those surface water rights away, then there's no other choice than for people to utilize groundwater, which hurts our basin. So we need that surface water supply. I think that's one. We want a locally driven SGMA process where we can come together as a community and ensure that our groundwater resource is protected. And more importantly, I just want to say, you know, for the groundwater storage, I think we're very concerned about that up in Northern California, because we see another target potentially. Our groundwater, which has been very strong in the northern Sacramento Valley, has maybe potentially being another target that we're going to use that as a storage basin for the state. No, this is local water. It's our local resource that needs to be protected. So I really hope that we do have some partnership to make sure that this project gets off the ground, because it does have those multiple benefits, including helping to protect our groundwater resource. And thank you again for being here.
And there is a clear and present danger. The sustainable groundwater management, this has historically been the purview of local government. It needs to continue to be that. There is legislation now that will be implemented. It's being implemented as we speak. It isn't going to be 20 years. Part of the problem is it may well be under that act that the state could usurp the local control. That was my major objection to that legislation and my opposition to it last year as I debated. To give, just as the state could usurp senior and junior water rights and pre-1914 water rights, they could also usurp local control. If the state arbitrarily, and I don't use that word lightly, state does a lot of things arbitrarily, saying, well, we don't like your local plan, so we're going to make you change it. And we deem that a greater beneficial use for your groundwater is to ship it somewhere else. Yeah. I'm more worried about the state doing that, to be honest with you, than any private property owner by far.
And is this on? I guess, and let me just clarify some dates, because I think you got some date. You nailed one date, but there's a couple other ones that are important. The legislation says that you have to demonstrate that you're sustainable 20 years out. I mean, that's what they want to see, is that you're getting to a point where your region is sustainable from a groundwater standpoint. So, that means, is it groundwater quality, groundwater levels? There's lots of different ways to define sustainability in the legislation. But, but what the legislation says is within 2 years, we all have to form local governance or groundwater sustainable agencies. So we have to have within our region agreement on how we're going to assign management to local agencies, whether it be the county, water agencies. Some areas we're talking about groundwater users forming their own district. And then by 2022 in this region, we actually have to develop a groundwater sustainability plan and submit it that shows that, in fact, we have a plan to get sustainability in the next 20 years. And if that plan in 2022 doesn't show that, then Senator Nielsen is correct. We will have the state board come in and say, you didn't do your job. Legislation gave you till 2022, which that's 7 years out, but I think we all know how fast time flies. That if you don't have it done, the state's going to come in and say, well, you didn't get it done. We gave you everything to do it. We're taking over. And so it is incumbent upon us as a region to work together. So, we are supportive of working with our other water agencies. David Guy at NACWA, he's helping coordinate. We're very supportive working with the counties. We have a close relationship with Butte County and their staff, Colusa County, Glenn County. So we're all going to have to work together in a county basin relationship to where we can show that we're sustainable as a region. So I encourage you to get involved and understand what the legislation really means. There's a lot to it, and there's a lot of work to be done. But we do have to do this locally and regionally to be make sure we have long-term sustainability versus the state taking it over.
just to add, nobody on this panel wants to see groundwater lifted and put up into that reservoir. This is, again, the high flow water that comes during the high flow rainy season out of Sacramento River. And what's on your side too is the market. That's expensive water to lift out of the ground and push that far up over into that reservoir. So you got that on your side. Then another thing to remember too is where the water goes. We're essentially creating new water. Whatever goes in that reservoir is water that would have been lost to flowing out to the ocean. So whether it's the 50% public water that is paying for half of that and goes for the purposes of the public water, which is basically environmental ecosystem, or the other 50%, the private water, which the lion's share so far is north of the Delta people putting in for it, that water stays local. Now, should they run out of people to help pay for that 50% of private water, if it ends up somebody south of the Delta, they're helping to pay for the project, okay? So we shouldn't be afraid of that, because we go back to, this is brand new water. This is water that would have been lost. So it's benefiting a lot of people across the board, whether it's the public benefit that they like to see or the private users. I hope it all stays right here. But at the end of the day, whoever helps pay for this project on the private side is a beneficial to the project, and remember, using new water. We're not taking water that is would have belonged to us here because it would have flowed out to the Delta. Okay. And again, taking the pressure off our aquifers and our other stored water. So I'll stop there.
Well, I know there was one question back here. Maybe we'll just finish with that. Or two more, and then we'll end up here. All right? Yeah. And this gentleman right here too.
Well, I'll ask him while he's going. We're talking about droughts. Well, aren't we talking about creating more water we have? We have both the federal and state legislative representatives here. You addressed it earlier. You need to streamline NEPA and CEQA so we can get work done on the ground. If we're up thinning the forest on the federal ground, just the federal grounds, in the Sierras, the regional forester wants to get treatments up to 500,000 acres a year. Because of frivolous appeals and lawsuits, they're not able to get more than 80,000 to 90,000 acres done. That's why we've got the fire problems. So if we do have a problem of global warming and a drought situation abatement, why aren't we looking at really reducing the NEPA problem so we can get thinning done on these national forests, stops the fire load, one, two, it increases the water yield that goes into the Feather River.
That's right.
There's a real opportunity to increase water yields, and we're not doing much about it.
And that's a really good point. Is it actually doing, some timber thinning in the national forest would actually help watersheds and improve our watersheds as well. And streamlining the NEPA process would help us get there. So that's a very good point. And increase our storage, really increase our yield of water. Yes, back there. We have a guy right here. Sorry.
Alan Chamberlain with Chico Currents. The Sacramento Bee reports, this question's for the subject matter experts too. I have a pretty good idea what the electeds think. The Sacramento Bee reports this afternoon that Westlands out of Fresno and the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California are taking steps to acquire the Delta wetlands properties. My question for the subject matter experts is there going to be a Delta to save in 10 years?
One of you want to address that,
well,
David?
In general, the Delta's not anything like it used to be, is it? I mean, it's changed, and that's what we're frustrated with, is we're finding that we're being asked in Northern California to submit additional water to a delta that is not natural in any shape or form, and the species are not something that were there originally. So I think the changing delta is placing some additional pressure on Northern California, and that's, I think, what Thad talked about earlier, we need to guard against. The Delta has changed so much that we can't save the Delta from Northern California with respect to our water supplies. That's why we're focusing so much on what we can do in our region to make our region sustainable and whole, and the Delta's a whole different dynamic.
So unfortunately, we got to get wrapped up here. But as I said, we'll stick around here. If you have questions for us, please come up and talk to us. Please take some of those materials that we have. And thank you for being here tonight.